Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today. I know what you have to be thinking when you're clicking on this video. It's one of two things. Number one, you're hopping in pretty interested in what I've put together, or more likely is the latter, which is, legally speaking, Fallout and the Outer Worlds cannot connect. And you would absolutely be correct. That is not unknown to me. However, keep in mind, this is a fun video. This also doesn't invalidate that Obsidian created the Outer Worlds with Fallout, specifically New Vegas, their most recent foray into Fallout, in mind. Obviously, Obsidian was thinking of Fallout when it came to the game's conversation system and exploration, but it goes deeper than that. I believe the evidence I'm going to present today will at least get the gears turning and hopefully lead to more investigations on how both Fallouts as well as the Outer Worlds can connect. This isn't uncommon in video games in general. Catherine takes place in the same universe as Persona, Red Faction is the future of the Saints Row universe, Watch Dogs and Abstergo from Assassin's Creed exist in the same timeline, Drakengard and Nier. Point being, you find this in a lot of games, whether it be unintentional in the case of The Last of Us and Naughty Dog's Uncharted, or it's available for speculation, and sometimes just fan service. Whatever it is, I just want to blow the door wide open on how Outer Worlds and Fallout New Vegas can be connected. So let's get it started. It all begins with Mr. House, the most prominent figure in New Vegas and my personal favorite route from the main story. Heading up the Securitrons that roam the wasteland, it's safe to say that House always had a technological edge to him. It was also safe to say that this man had sky-high ambitions for the future, not only of the Mojave Wasteland, but also the rest of the world and even beyond that. Did you know Mr. House had a roadmap laid out for the future? One that sounds awfully familiar in today's day and age? Let's give it a listen.
The city's economy is a blast furnace in which can be forged the steel of a new rail line running straight to a new horizon. What is the NCR? A society of people desperate to experience comfort, ease, luxury. A society of customers. With all that money pouring in, give me 20 years and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation.
So Mr. House said within 100 years, he'd like to send his colony ships to search for new planets. Now that the Outer Worlds is a thing, this is actually lining up big time, and it's led to me doing some serious digging. Hell, even the timelines practically coincide. The year New Vegas takes place is 2281, and the Outer Worlds? 2355. Granted, this sits at 74 years, not 100, but to act like his game plan would be exactly on time, on the dot 100 years, and that zero technological advancements would occur given the Fallout universe's current technological state with plasma weaponry and power armor turning standard soldiers into walking tanks would be a smidge foolish in my opinion. What? I'm not making exceptions so my dream theory pushes through. You are. So at this point, we have a possible nod at a Mr. House statement and a timeline that does fall pretty closely into place, but it cuts deeper than that over time. October 23rd, 2077 is the most important date in the Fallout franchise as far as I'm concerned. This is a day a war began and ended in a flash where China and the United States started to sling nukes around the globe, leading to total atomic annihilation. This was termed the Great War. Only those fortunate enough to be selected by Vault Tech and get into their assigned vaults would survive, and even then, most vaults collapsed with one tragedy or another due to the social experiments of Vault Tech as they tried to perform their own version of natural selection so that the best and brightest rose into the wasteland to bring the world to a new age because they sort of all accepted that we're screwed anyway. This one seems more like an Easter egg, but I believe it's worth noting regardless for recognition's sake, and we'll build an argument later in this video. As the intro for the Outer Worlds rolls on, we quickly learn about a colony ship known as the Hope, carrying thousands of brilliant scientists and engineers, had begun drifting, and this may prevent the revival of all of these bright minds. The date this happened? October 23rd. However, the year is 2320, which is 243 years after the bombs had dropped. Now, I thought to myself for a moment here, I was really galaxy braining it, saying, how does time pass in space versus on Earth, and how does time pass when you travel through space, and if there was even a minimal difference. I came across an interesting article about Scott Kelly and how thanks to his space travel that him and his brother, who had been born 6 seconds apart in 1964, are now separated by 6 seconds and 5 milliseconds. So there is actually something there, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the atomic clock experiment where you'd shoot a clock right up into space and then leave one on Earth, and when the clock in space came down, you'd see that the times are different, but this was due to a difference in gravitational pull. With that all in mind, it appears that the Outer Worlds does have its own version of how time passes via space travel, where we can see right before we note the Great War date on the terminal, 10 short years will feel like minutes thanks to the comfort and safety of your very own hibernation chamber, which is what your main character along with many other colonists are in aboard the Hope as well as the Groundbreaker. It also says, wake up to a perfect society, where you see Earth 2285 circled just 4 short years after New Vegas is set. So I do wonder what that means, but it's all food for thought here. Now, you may be wondering why I essentially covered the Great War as a whole when it's largely a theory and one that doesn't add to the argument that these two universes are spiritually connected. Well, next on the list is a little lore that is far more concrete and would serve at connecting some dots, once again involving the Great War. So when you're on Edgewater, the opening planet for the Outer Worlds, you can head to a location known as the Abandoned Outpost, which is northeast of Edgewater and east of the community center. You can see it here on the map. Inside one of these buildings, you'll find a terminal sitting on a counter which has some messages in it, but first, some brief context to help understand these messages. You see, there is a council called the Earth Directorate, which the Halcyon colony remains in contact with. Updates of progress on the new galaxy are sent to Earth. Now, with that knowledge, let's take a look at the opening from Clement Eldridge to Jefferson Bartell. The subject is Spirit of Adventure, and it seems these two are sharing perspectives on where the true spirit of adventure lies between Earth and Halcyon. The opening paragraph states, "Of course I'd never dispute that Earth is the heart of the whole colonial system, but the real adventure and independent spirit upon which humankind truly thrives is to be found out here among the furthest colonies." After that, Clement corrects a statement from Jefferson that isn't available in this terminal. He says, "I still think you're wrong about the history, though. The discovery of the skip drive was not what gave the Earth Directorate power over the corporations. The high costs of the Great War left them in a weakened state, and the skip drive was simply the extra leverage the Directorate needed to return to power." Whoa, hard pause. What this email suggests is that a Great War, arguably the same as Fallout, left them in a weakened position, which Fallout certainly did, and their only trade piece into power was a skip drive, which for those who don't know is an object attached to the Hope as well as the Groundbreaker, another ship that you do visit in your adventures in the Outer World, used these to let these ships essentially skip to new parts of the galaxy. Now, this may be looking a bit too deep, but the capital G and the capital W in Great War does show that this is a moment in history and not an adjective to describe said war. While it doesn't add much to the conversation, Jefferson's message to Clement reads, "I find I must disagree with your theories about the Earth Directorate's place in the colonial system. Sadly, as much as I appreciate the board and the new frontier they've opened up for us, I believe Halcyon and all the other colonies on the rim of the galaxy would fall to pieces or war amongst themselves if Earth Directorate wasn't around to regulate trade and settle disputes. Do you think the corporations would accept the mandated inclusion of an Earth Minister if they had a choice in the matter?" Now, I believe this message is here to make it not such an obvious nod like, hey, look, Fallout, and instead create a dialogue between these two men. I have a theory at the end of all this, and I'm looking forward to reading yours, but lastly, we do have one more key to this puzzle. Before we get into that key, spoiler warning. Do not watch further if you don't want a really cool aspect of the main story in the Outer Worlds ruined for you. While this is another concrete piece of evidence, I would have put it earlier in the video, but I want to make sure those of you who are yet to finish the Outer Worlds were actually able to enjoy most of my argument on this connection without having any major spoilers be thrown in. So, if you haven't beat the game yet, tab out, come back later because I'm about to ruin some major parts of how this story wraps up. Now that you've been properly warned, let's get into it. When you're on Byzantium, you'll find Clark, who is the Earth Minister that has been supposedly teaming up with Rockwell. We see it in propaganda all around the Outer Worlds, except that's not the case, and he's actually been on house arrest for quite a while. He asks you before you leave to send a message to Earth for him, which sounded pretty substantial even though it was listed in the tasks section of your quest log and not as a legitimate side quest. If you do it, you'll note that it takes 3 to 9 months for a reply to come back from Earth. I shrugged my shoulders at this initially because I thought it was just a task there to build the world, but it hits you harder much later on if you do this in the story when you learn that it's actually been years since anyone has heard from Earth and that you're all stuck on Halcyon now. Given the mention of a great war, say Fallout's Great War, that would certainly leave Earth in disarray. Even in 2287, where Fallout 4 takes place, the Wasteland is trying to rebuild, yet it's still a hostile place full of death and dread. What's to say something awful didn't happen to the Earth Directorate, given the state of the planet? Of course, that would counter the idea that Mr. House's plan worked and helped propel the world into a new technological age, but it's food for thought. What's not to say that Mr. House's plan worked, but we were still in a post-apocalyptic state despite all those technological advancements, and all our resources were being poured into this one bit of space travel, and now here we are, but things fell apart afterwards because the Earth invested too much in that, and then they lost connection. All in all, I think there are threads here intentionally put there by Obsidian. The usage of Great War, the dates, the house timeline. There's a lot here that could really argue towards them thinking of Fallout New Vegas while they built this world, and I think that's neat, whether it's a nod or even a giant Easter egg and I just look silly for digging so deep. I still think there's something respectable that I put together here that was actually really fun to talk about. I think it's exciting at the idea of Obsidian literally spiritually connecting the Outer Worlds to the Fallout franchise in little ways here or there. They do have to be a bit careful. Something like the Great War, that is a pretty big, I'd say significant nod towards something in the Fallout universe. But I think it's awesome that they're doing something like this. As a longtime Fallout fan, it had me thrilled. It had me one level more invested in this universe than I ever expected to be. So that is just my theory, ladies and gentlemen. I think that there is something here. I'd love to hear from all of you in the comments down below. Is there more that you discovered that maybe I missed about the Outer Worlds and Fallout New Vegas connecting? Is maybe there's something that I actually missed and it totally uproots my entire argument? God, I hope not. But let me know in the comments. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content I create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.